Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Gradishar, Director of Breast Oncology at Northwestern University, and I'd like to speak to you briefly about clinical trials. When you see your oncologist, you may be speaking to him about a variety of different things, but one of the topics that inevitably arises should be a discussion of what clinical trials you might be eligible for. Clinical trials apply to patients with all stages of breast cancer. This is a research mechanism that allows us to determine the benefits of a specific intervention. That may be a drug therapy, it may be a surgical intervention, it could be any of a variety of different things. Clinical trials are used across medicine to determine whether or not a new therapy or new intervention is better than what's currently available. So these types of trials are used in patients with high blood pressure, with diabetes, who are undergoing new and unique surgical procedures. We try and look at whether a new therapy offers benefit and try and assess what the side effects of that intervention might be. As it applies to cancer therapy, there are different phases of clinical trials, and the early phase trials often apply to patients with more advanced disease. So as an example, a phase 1 trial, usually with respect to medical oncology, deals with a new cancer drug. And that drug may have shown some promise in a laboratory setting or in animal studies, and it was able to demonstrate that you could have an anti-tumor effect. Because the drug looked promising, it then goes into early phase 1 trials. A phase 1 trial attracts patients that have advanced disease generally, that have exhausted the standard therapies. The goal of a phase 1 trial then is not necessarily for a specific disease, but rather to look at the characteristics of that drug in a patient population, specifically to try and determine what the optimal way of administering the drug is, to assess what the side effects are, and to look at the optimal dose of the drug. And when they treat a population of patients, usually a couple dozen patients, hopefully they characterize the way the drug should be optimally administered, and the hope is that there'll be some evidence in a patient that there is an anti-tumor effect. And if it is observed that there is some anti-cancer effect, that drug is taken into a phase 2 trial. And then that trial is generally populated with patients with the disease where it looked like it was working best. So for example, drug X looks good in a phase 1 trial in a couple of patients that had brain tumors. You may do a phase trial that recruits entirely brain tumor patients. Or the same thing if it looks promising in breast cancer, a phase 2 trial is done with that drug only in breast cancer patients. We know what the dose should be based on the phase 1 trial. We then look at that population of breast cancer patients as an example, and we try to determine what fraction of patients are actually benefiting, what fraction is the tumor shrinking in, what fraction of patients are having prolonged time until the disease progresses. And furthermore, we are better able to characterize the side effect profile of the drug in that population of patients. If a drug looks very promising in a phase 2 setting, it typically goes on to phase 3. And where phase 3 trials are very commonly done and where you are likely to hear about them is in patients with early stage disease. It's very important to keep in mind that whatever we view as standard therapy that's available in the community today, again, you could be talking about an antihypertensive drug or diabetes, was at one point it was part of a clinical trial. And it was demonstrated in the clinical trial to be better than what was ever the standard at the time. So today we have certain chemotherapy recipes we use for early stage breast cancer patients. In order to improve the outcome, we have to tease the recipe a bit. That may be changing the components of the recipe or adding a new drug to it or changing how the drug is administered. So we often compare what is ever standard to the nuanced or different therapy with a new drug added or something changed. We treat thousands of patients in an identical fashion, and then we follow those patients for many years. And the goal is to determine, is the newer recipe better? Is it the same? Is it associated with different side effects? And once we have that information, we can make a judgment. Should it replace the standard of care? So if you're not hearing about clinical trials from your oncologist, you should ask them about clinical trials and if you're eligible for any that are currently available. And that would be one of the reasons that one would seek a second opinion at a larger academic institution such as Northwestern, should you not be hearing about clinical trials. In many cases, clinical trials offer you the best type of therapy that's currently available for the problem you have.